Please join Cameron Stack as he leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Will you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Present. Arms. Order. Arms. Post. Right. Cut.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our annual Veterans Concert. We would like to thank our bagpiper, Amy McLaughlin, also Chief Master Sergeant Tom Puzo, and the Salem High School Air Force Junior ROTC Color Guard for their presentation during this time. And then Cameron Stack, representing the Boy Scouts of America, for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The first piece we would like to play for you this afternoon is Strategic Air Command by Clifton Williams. The Strategic Air Command March was written as a tribute to the United States Strategic Air Command, also known as SAC, headquartered at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. The march premiered at the Sax Band's annual concert in Omaha, Nebraska on July 14, 1963, and was conducted by the composer. It has since been used on all SAC Band concerts and at appropriate military ceremonies. On a more local note, Pease Air Force Base in Portsmouth was selected for development as a Strategic Air Command base in 1951. Groundbreaking for the new SAC facilities took place in 1954, and the first B-47 bombers arrived in 1956. The following year, the Air Force renamed the base Pease Air Force Base in honor of New Hampshire native Captain Harl Pease, Jr., who earned the Congressional Medal of Honor for heroism during World War II. The mission of the base was to maintain a combat-ready force capable of long-range bombardment operations. From 1956 until its closure in 1991, Pease Air Force Base maintained that mission. called American River Songs by Pierre LaPlante. The Mississippi River is the third largest river basin in the world and home to 25% of all North American fish species. It truly is the father of American rivers. During the Civil War, the Mississippi was an important military highway that bordered 10 states, roughly equally dividing Union and Confederate loyalties. Both sides soon realized that control of the river was a crucial strategic priority. In April 1862, the Union secured two key points: New Orleans at the mouth of the river and a double bend on the Kentucky-Tennessee line, leaving only the middle section in Confederate hands. When the major river ports of Memphis and Vicksburg fell, the liberation of the Mississippi was complete, and Lincoln declared, "The Father of waters again goes unvexed to the sea." This split the Confederacy in two, with the western half forced to operate as a separate department, greatly inhibiting supplies and communications and tilting the odds decisively in the favor of the Union. Next, we'd like to play In Flanders Fields by Andrew Boyson. In Flanders Fields is a war poem written during the First World War by Canadian physician Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. The day before he wrote his famous poem, one of McCrae's closest friends was killed in fighting and buried in a makeshift grave with a simple wooden cross. Wild poppies were already beginning to bloom between the crosses, marking the many graves. Unable to help his friends, or any of the others who had died, John McCrae gave them a voice through his poem. He was inspired to write it on May 3rd, 1915, after presiding over the funeral of a friend and fellow soldier. Flanders Fields is a common English name of the World War I battlefields in Belgium and France. It is one of the most quoted poems from the war. As a result of its immediate popularity, parts of the poem were used in efforts and appeals to recruit soldiers and raise money selling war bonds. Its references to the red poppies that grew over the graves of fallen soldiers resulted in the remembrance poppy becoming one of the world's most recognized memorial symbols for soldiers who have died in conflict. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. we are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Our next piece is called Abide With Me by William Monk and arranged by Jay Dawson. Abide With Me is a Christian hymn by Scottish Anglican Henry Light, a prayer for God to stay with us throughout life and in death. It's most often performed to the tune of Eventide by the Englishman William Monk. The hymn is sung at the annual Anzac Day services, commemorating the anniversary of the landing of Australian and New Zealand Army Corps troops at Gallipoli in Turkey on April 25th in 1915. It is also used during some Remembrance Day services in Canada and the United Kingdom. Some of the lyrics include, hold thou thy cross before my closing eyes. Shine through the gloom and point me to the skies. Heaven's morning breaks and earth's vain shadows flee. In life, in death, O Lord, abide with me. we would like to play for you Who's Who in Navy Blue by John Philip Sousa. Sousa was born on November 6, 1954. That's his birthday today. Just thought I'd remind everybody, right? In Washington, D.C., the third of 100 children. I'm sorry, 10 children. 100 would be quite amazing, wouldn't it? His father played trombone in the U.S. Marine Band, so he grew up around Marine Band music. He began his musical studies at the age of 6, studying voice and multiple instruments. His father enlisted him in the Marines at the age of 13 as an apprentice after he tried to run away to join the circus band. He published his first composition at age 18. He composed Who's Who in Navy Blue as a result of a request from a midshipman named Ingram. He was the president of the class of 1920 at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. It had become the custom for each graduating class to have its own new song or march to be performed at graduation. Sousa had served in the Navy in World War I, and this no doubt had a great deal to do with their decision to approach the great composer. Who's Who in Navy Blue was dedicated to Tecumseh, the famous Native American whose statue stands outside Bancroft Hall at the Naval Academy. Sousa composed words to the melody of the trio, which read, "The moon is shining on the rippling waves, the stars are twinkling in the evening sky, and in our dreams, Tecumseh softly tells us we'll be admirals by and by." Our speaker today is a former Navy submarine sailor, electrician's mate, second class. He is the retired fire chief of Plaistow and the current base commander for the Thresher Base chapter of the United States Submarine Veterans. Please join me in welcoming John McCardle.
Before I get on with what I like to speak about, I often said to myself, as I'd be sitting back over there somewhere, part of this ensemble, that if I had the opportunity to recognize a person who was a friend of mine, but who gave me the opportunity to play here, probably well over 20 years, and that's Tony Duarmeo. Tony, are you? He's here. Yeah. Well, I know. As a friend, as a mentor, Tony has been a person who has influenced a lot of young people. He has brought this ensemble from something that was, we played the same song 3 or 4 times in a row, call it different names. Here we are today, and this is the first time, and I'm going to say about 22 years, that I've had the opportunity to listen to the ensemble and truly appreciate the musicianship that has grown every year that he has brought this to us. So thank you, Tony, very much. You say that now, but anyway. So I was asked to speak this afternoon, and they really didn't give me a topic, but figuring it's Veterans Day, Kathy McGurk, who made the phone call to me, said, well, you can talk a little bit about your Navy time. And I said, I really can't do that because the submarine service, we typically are held to secrecy, no matter how long we've been out of the service. We can talk about some of the things we did not related to operations, but to me, that would be like dragging out the 1960s Grand Canyon summer vacation slideshow. That probably wouldn't interest you too much. But I'm going to reflect on the topic of what does it mean to be a veteran. It sounds simple, but in reality for me, it's hard because I don't remember when I wasn't a veteran. My story kind of starts back in the mid-70s, and it's not unlike any other veteran of my age, which we won't divulge. By some stroke of luck, I graduated from high school, and I had committed to joining the Navy because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. But much like some kids that would go to college, we had a delayed entry program, and I was able to take the summer off and eventually report for duty in Orlando. I served for 6 years, 2 of which were an aggressive education program that qualified me as an operator for the nuclear propulsion plant of either a surface ship or a submarine. I thought I had a pretty good chance of going up to the surface ship because the prototype I trained at was for the USS Enterprise, which was a nuclear carrier. And they were building 2 new carriers in Norfolk, Virginia, one the USS Nimitz and the other the Eisenhower. And I thought by putting in for both of those, I would get a shot at probably not going to sea because I had no idea what that would be like. But for reasons unknown to me, I was sent to a very unique submarine, home ported in Groton, Connecticut, USS Narwhal. And this was during the Cold War. The Narwhal was one of a kind. She had many improvements over other boats of the same class that allowed her to be far more stealthy and quieter than other submarines. As such, we were assigned a lot of special operations. Although we had a home port, we didn't spend a lot of time in home port. We could operate in other areas where other submarines, although they could operate there, we were far more quieter. At times it was very boring. Sometimes it was very exciting. We worked an 18-hour day, 6 hours on watch, 6 hours maybe doing maintenance and training, and hopefully get some time there to sleep. There was always underlying pressure of knowing that you were separated from the crushing ocean depths by about 3 inches of steel. It was always rewarding to know that when we had completed an assignment, we had strengthened our national defense, And that was only true for our boat, it was true for every boat in the fleet, then and now. I completed my service commitment of 6 years and I kept out of trouble for the most part, and I went to work for an engineering company in Boston. Eventually worked for 21 years in the commercial nuclear industry before applying for and accepting the position of fire chief here in Plaistow. I'd been an on-call firefighter for 10 years, and I had attained the rank of captain, and for some reason I was chosen as chief in 2001. When I decided to retire in December of 2018, I spent 28 years with the department, nearly 18 as chief officer. I felt I was pretty successful in that position, and I attributed that not only to my personality, but much to my wife and family. Judy's sitting over there, and I gotta make sure that I let her know that I appreciate her all the time. But also of my experience that I gained in the submarine service. Some strange reason, I'm assuming because Popeye wasn't available, I'm here today. What does this have to do with being a veteran? I took time to reflect on those veterans I knew when I was growing up. I felt many of those people were simply ordinary people. I saw them in the community, at church, or in school. They were my neighbors' parents, parents of school friends, and some were my teachers. Those people were members of what became known as the Greatest Generation. Not just because they defeated what is arguably to be considered the greatest threat to world peace, but, and I believe equally important, for the many things they did after their service. You're probably aware that Tom Brokaw wrote a book called The Greatest Generation. It's a very good read, and I would encourage you to read it if you haven't. I looked up to those veterans then, and I still do today, although their numbers are dwindling. I also noticed that many of these veterans didn't talk much about what they had experienced. They seemed to put it all behind them and put a lid on the box. My father-in-law was an example of this. I knew that he had been a tank mechanic with General Patton. I also knew from photos that he had been part of the units that had liberated several concentration camps. I didn't know he was a survivor of Normandy until one day in passing when he mentioned it, and he didn't talk about it. Those memories for him were difficult to speak of. But it's appropriate to honor these veterans whenever we can, not just Veterans Day. Not only as a nation, but as a global community. We owe them a huge debt of gratitude. I know when I thank them, I sense a genuine appreciation for the acknowledgement. As I grew into my mid-teens, I noticed another group of veterans emerging in our society. These were the soldiers returning from a very faraway place, one that many never heard of in Southeast Asia, Vietnam. This war followed our involvement in the lesser-known conflict in Korea, sometimes referred to as the Forgotten War. Many are familiar with the Korean conflict from watching episodes of MASH. Veterans from Vietnam were noticeably different than those that I knew from World War II or Korea. Many of the veterans were brothers of my friends, not the parents of friends. They were the older kid on the playground who just a few years ago had taught us how to play baseball or football. They're the older guy that would allow us to help him work on his car. They may even have dated one of my older sisters, and as I found out that my sister dated a lot of people. They were essentially my peers. They were my generation. It was not uncommon during Sunday Mass to have prayers requested for one of our hometown soldiers who had been wounded or killed in that land so far away. As the survivors came home from this war, many were angry and frustrated. Their battle and military experience seemed completely different than the generation who went before them. This war was different. The American public wavered on what the ultimate goal of the conflict was. There was social unrest across the country, and this eventually was felt in the ranks of those who sent to fight this unpopular war. Social attitudes towards these veterans were completely opposite to what soldiers returning from the battlefields 20 years before had experienced. They tried to assimilate back to society. Many were successful. They put their overseas experiences behind them and pursued living the American dream. Some would never mention their military experience when they interviewed for jobs because they feared it would hurt their chances of being hired. Others didn't make that transition, and to this day continue to suffer from invisible wounds suffered decades ago. Some were inflicted in the jungle, some were consequences of chemicals used to clear brush from the jungle, and others just by not being accepted by the public upon returning home. All of these veterans, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, are true heroes. They answered the nation's call to serve. Whatever the reason for the conflict, it wasn't theirs to decide right or wrong. They all deserve our respect and thanks. In recent years, there's been a concerted effort to recognize those who feel they were not accepted at home. But their participation in what was arguably considered one of our most contentious periods in our history. Particularly around Veterans Day and Memorial Day, you will find ceremonies and presentations to these brave men, and now an increasing number of women who answered the call to duty and may not have received a warm welcome home. Today, we have among us the sons and daughters of my generation, returning from the global war on terror. These veterans have benefited from the lessons we learned from our experience with Vietnam regarding the returning veterans. Regardless of what we think about the various and seemingly unending conflicts in the Middle East, our returning veterans are, as a group, regarded with respect and dignity. But not all come home, and not all who come home are the same person that left their families. It's our obligation as a community to remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, and to not marginalize those who carry both visible and invisible wounds from the battlefields every day. I've been fortunate. I say fortunate versus lucky because I was presented with opportunities based on the time and effort I put into my military service, not because of my service alone. When my father dropped me off to be inducted, being a man of few words, unlike me, he said, "Good luck, work hard, and don't embarrass us." I took that to heart, and I've learned that anything of value will not simply be handed to you, whether or not you're a veteran. It has to be earned. Over the years since I left the service, I've continually worked in areas that required people to trust me in my decisions. They have to gain respect for me, and that respect is always earned by maintaining one's personal integrity. That reputation is forged by the things you do as well as the things you don't do every day. I learned this as a member of the submarine community. There is one trait that is common among veterans, particularly those who serve in submarines. That's accountability. We were accountable for all that we did, whether on duty on board the boat, on our own time ashore. But who were we accountable to? The captain, the officers? Yes and yes. But more importantly, we were always accountable to each other, and most importantly to ourselves. The reason is simple. A small mistake in the unforgiving environment of being hundreds of feet below the ocean surface can have disastrous results. I can think of no other type of service where inattentiveness or small mistakes have the potential for losing not only the submarine, but all who are on board. No second chances, no do-overs, no oops, I didn't mean it. Every crew member knew that he or she could be the weak link. And it was in our constant training that we learned to be exceptionally critical of ourselves and to set the bar beyond what was acceptable and never to accept average work. I carried this trait with me, whether I realized it or not, into my work after the military and specifically into the fire service. To this day, I refuse to accept average, even though I probably could. I just find it hard to do. This also holds true for being honest all the time. Sometimes that hurts people's feelings, but in the long run, people respect you for not hiding from the truth. There are times when my wife has suggested, usually with an elbow to the ribs, that it's advisable to keep my thoughts to myself. But in general, I've learned that if someone asks for my opinion, they want to know how I honestly feel, and I'll generally tell them. Another aspect of being a veteran deals with something that we all should reflect upon, particularly in today's very contentious political atmosphere. And that's the concept of patriotism. For years, I don't believe anyone questioned what this really meant. I'm an American. I love America. You're an American, you love America. We would stand side by side and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, or salute the colors when the national anthem is played. We could certainly have differing political ideology and still be patriotic citizens, and more importantly, we could be friends. It seems not so much today. Today it seems patriotism is being confused with politics and political rhetoric. If someone doesn't see things how another person sees those same things, they're unpatriotic or the enemy. We seem to have abandoned our civility that could lead to consensus over desire for political and absolute control. This was not the intent of our government. We need to strive for the middle ground where I believe most of us reside, not the extremes where the rhetoric and fear is generated. When I was sworn into the Navy, I took an oath to defend our Constitution and our democracy. At no time was that oath rescinded. I firmly believe in our Constitution, our republic, and our way of life. I believe that our flag represents all of us as a nation. The good, the bad, and the downright ugly. I will show respect that I learned as a child for our national anthem, and I will show respect for national anthems of other countries should I be present when it's played. One thing that I've learned is that whenever that flag has been outside of our United States in a humanitarian mission, it has been a symbol of hope for people striving for their own freedom, equality, or simply a different life. It has flown over more disasters around the world than the flag of any other nation. Seeing it has given far more people hope of a better life than any other symbol from any other nation. We certainly have our problems today, but I believe we have more people looking to solve those problems for all of us than we have trying to detract us from our own self-respect as a nation. The late Senator John McCain, a Navy aviator, who served years of captivity in the infamous Hanoi Hilton prison war camp in North Vietnam, once said, and I'll paraphrase, "It's a mistake to look at our history through the lens of today." He's saying that we can judge for ourselves the events of the past, but we can't apply today's standards to the situation of yesteryear. We can't change our history. We can learn from it so as not to repeat the mistakes that were made. But we can't hold ourselves responsible for what we now determine to have been mistakes many years ago. If we do that, we can't move forward in a concerted effort to make sure we don't repeat those same mistakes. At this point, I have a greater appreciation for the service and sacrifice average Americans make to serve our country and our military. The Submarine Veterans Group that I belong to ensures that those who gave the ultimate sacrifice in submarine service are honored and remembered. It is our mission. In particular, we have taken the responsibility to remember and honor the men lost on one particular boat, the USS Thresher. Thresher was the lead or the first submarine in a new and extremely advanced class of submarines. Designed for both speed and stealth, she and the boats that followed in her class were significantly quieter than her predecessors. They had sonar capabilities that were state-of-the-art and were intended to patrol the ocean searching for Soviet submarines that could threaten our shores. Like the submarine, her crew was comprised of the finest submariners the Navy had. They were the elite. In April of 1963, during testing that was routine following a shipyard overhaul, operating approximately 200 miles off the coast of Cape Cod, the submarine experienced some minor difficulties during a test dive to the designed operating depth. There were additional problems that ensued, and they encountered a situation where they could not regain their ability to return to the surface. They continued at the bottom of the ocean. Eventually, sea pressure caused an instantaneous implosion of the hull. The debris field is scattered on the ocean floor some 8,000 feet deep. But their story doesn't stop there. In what has been deemed to be the most tragic peacetime disaster in our Navy's history, there was something positive that came out of the Court of Inquiry and the subsequent investigations. From all of the data that was collected, reviewed, and dissected, the Navy implemented a program to prevent another submarine from experiencing the same fate of the Thresher and her crew. The subsave program changed the way we built, operated, and maintained submarines. The boats in Thresher's class were eventually upgraded to meet this standard, and all submarines constructed since the implementation have met the subsave standard, with maybe one or two exceptions. This was a unique result of a tragedy. In a sense, we can say that the crew gave their ultimate sacrifice, and from that, potentially thousands of sailors who have followed in their path in submarines do so in the same hostile environment, but in a safer and more technologically advanced submarine. To put this into perspective, prior to subsave, we lost on average one submarine every 3 years. And that was during peacetime. Since subsave program was implemented, we have not lost a single submarine, although there have been several incidents that had the potential for significant, if not complete, losses. That's the legacy of Thresher, and that is a mission we perpetuate to this day. After more than 50 years of tragedy, a permanent memorial was dedicated to the crew of Thresher and their legacy. This took place in Arlington National Cemetery in September of 2019. It has been the goal of many veterans to honor our lost brothers and sisters. It is also important for the families of those lost to know we still care and remember their sacrifice has not been forgotten. I have been fortunate to have met several family members of the crew lost on Thresher. For those that I've had a personal relationship, I always take the time to acknowledge the loss of their loved one. But also, that through their sacrifice, our sailors are safer and have the highest probability of returning home after every mission. With that being said, as a veteran, I believe I have a responsibility to respect those who paved the way for my service and have secured our way of life, not only for me, but for future generations. We have a responsibility as veterans to encourage our youth to be the next generation tasked with preserving our country as the beacon of hope, not only for our citizens, but for those from other places who seek a better way of life and are willing to contribute and sacrifice to keep that beacon of hope burning. Thank you.
Thank you, John. That was amazing. Thank you very much. Okay, we will continue our musical portion of the program with a piece called Celtic Farewell by Michael Sweeney. Celtic Farewell was written in memory of Brian Gallagher, a band director at the middle school in Cleveland, Tennessee. A key element of this work is the use of Highland bagpipes that add that flavor, that Celtic flavor. And bagpipes were Brian's favorite instrument. Brought to the United States over 150 years ago by the Scottish immigrants, the bagpipe has become a symbol of mourning for fallen heroes, especially veterans, firefighters, and policemen. The hauntingly beautiful music of the pipe is especially suited to songs of mourning, whether played by a single piper, an ensemble, or by a bagpipe band. They lend a feeling of reverence and honor to the occasion. Here, the beloved traditional Scottish ballad, The Parting Glass, is combined with an original melody to create a beautifully paced and sensitive musical memorial. Our next piece is titled Greatest Generation by Robert Smith. This piece was written for the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor and the gathering of heroes from around the world to pay tribute to America's greatest generation. It premiered on December 6, 2016 at the Pearl Harbor Survivors Gala in Honolulu, Hawaii, and was performed again on the morning of December 7th at Pearl Harbor as part of a ceremony at the USS Missouri overlooking the USS Arizona Memorial. These first performances were narrated by World War II in Normandy veteran Colonel Arnold Gabriel, the Director Emeritus of the United States Air Force Band. Composer Robert Smith's stirring tribute to those that changed our world in World War II also pays tribute to all who have served in our armed forces. Join us as we thank those that served above South and ensured liberty for Americans past, present, and future. Born in a time of transition, promise, and prosperity, children of the earliest 20th century entered a world where anything seemed possible in America. In the aftermath of World War I, we saw America coming of age on all fronts. With the boom of Wall Street and the rise of major industry, the United States of America was quickly taking its place as the most powerful nation on earth. The Roaring '20s ushered in a new era of American dreams and indulgence. Popular culture was rich with entertainment and personalities such as Babe Ruth and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Radio was broadcasting to the heart of America while the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame became household names. Only history could tell us these were temporary times, soon to be lashed by the winds of change and uncertainty. Shortly after the Blackest of Mondays, in October 1929, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was promising a new deal for America and declaring the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. While others in the world were plotting and sowing seeds of war, America spent most of the 1930s healing and growing. As the decade neared completion, we were once again entertained by major musical stars, and Clark Gable and Bette Davis lit up the silver screens across America. In 1940, we entered a new world of promise and prosperity, but it was clear to many that war would define this generation's coming of age. On December 7, 1941, a day that lives in infamy, Pearl Harbor was attacked. The news spread like wildfire across the radio waves, changing the lives of all who heard it. America mobilized like no other society in history. In the weeks that followed, we sent our youth from all walks of life around the world in both directions. Not to conquer, but to liberate. Farmers, truck drivers, miners, lawyers, teachers from every ethnic background and religion joined the effort. FDR reminded us that we are now in this war. We are all in it, all the way. Every single man, woman, and child is a partner in the most tremendous undertaking of our American history. Americans believed in the cause. The freedoms of speech, religion, and economic prosperity became our vision, not just for us, but the entire planet. After hard-fought battles such as Midway and Guadalcanal, America led the world on June 6, 1944, in the largest amphibious invasion in history. With Pearl Harbor as the beginning and the beaches of Normandy as the beginning of the end, this noble generation rose to heights not seen before or since. We invite the heroes that served in the armed forces to stand. Stand up united in purpose and passion for a greater world. A world in which you fought, dreamed, and shared with the generations to follow. Lift your hearts as we salute you, and remember those that gave selflessly and changed history, America's greatest generation. I didn't really see anybody standing. I know we have veterans out there. I did invite you to stand, but we're going to invite you one more time with this next song. The next piece we'll be playing is Armed Forces Salute, which is arranged by Bob Loden. This melody features the themes from all 5 our nation's military branches: Army, Coast Guard, Marines, Air Force, and Navy. All these tunes are familiar and stir pride in our hearts. Nearly every American has either served in or been close to someone who served in the military. Listening to these tunes is another reminder that freedom is always a work in progress, and that sacrifice has been demanded generation after generation to keep that freedom secure. When you hear your branch's song, we would appreciate if you would stand so we may all recognize you for the great sacrifice you made for all of us. Our program with Stars and Stripes Forever by John Philip Sousa. John Philip Sousa was an American bandmaster and composer. He was the leader of the Band of the United States Marine Corps from 1880 to 1892. When he resigned, he organized his own band, which quickly realized great success. In late 1896, Sousa and his wife took a much-deserved vacation to Europe. While there, Sousa received word that the manager of the Sousa Band had died suddenly. The band was scheduled to begin another cross-country tour soon, and Sousa knew he must return to America at once to take over the band's business affairs. While the ship steamed out of the harbor, he paced on the deck and began to sense a rhythmic beat of a band playing within his brain. When he reached shore, he set down the measures that had been in his mind, and not a note of it had ever been changed. The Stars and Stripes Forever was completed on Christmas Day in 1896 and is considered to be by far the most popular march ever written. It is now the official march of the United States of America.
It's, I think, my favorite concert of the year. Have a seat. I'm done. You're not here to talk to me or listen to me talk. I want to say a few thank yous, though, so I'd really be remiss. First, I want to thank you for coming out and spending this beautiful Sunday afternoon in remembering some of our honored veterans. Really. We can't do it on Veterans Day because unfortunately some people are working, so we do it as close as we can. We hope you appreciate that. I would also like to thank our narrator tonight, who did yeoman's job, Susan Miner. So Susan, would you stand up? She's normally a flute player, but she does such a great job. I hope you appreciate all the narrations, all the little tidbits about the pieces that we do, and of course about introducing our soloists. Our soloist tonight was Dr. Amy McLaughlin. I don't know where she is. Where are you? Oh, here she is. Yeah. Thank you. She's a double threat, and the double threat is not a usual one. Obviously saxophone, but not played that well. A lot of us play saxophone. But bagpipes and saxophone in combination, I'll have to sit and talk with her and see how that came about. Although her last name is McLaughlin and not the Bartolomeo, so there might be something to do with it. I would like to thank our technical assistants in the booth, Anthony de Bartolomeo. He made us sound and look good, made the flag drop, put the flags up, and did all of that. We have refreshments out there. I would like to draw your attention to the barrel, the drum that's right out there. We would like to say we do this for love, but the music people won't collect love when we pay for music and all of that good stuff. If you enjoyed what you heard, if you could just drop something in the drum, that would be great. How about another hand for this band? Everyone stand up. It's a lot of fun working with them on Thursday nights, and if any of you play an instrument and you have a desire, several of those people that are standing here were sitting there at one time, and then they made the magical fourth wall transition from the audience to the stage. So we invite you to do that. If you have an instrument at home that could be used, let's put it to good use. And again, enjoy the refreshments. Visit the drum if the spirit so moves you. Thank you for coming. If not, we'll see you next year. Thank you.